So the neighbor from hell. Well, it's actually been two neighbors from hell in a row. Now let me give you a little backstory here. I moved in here about 5 years ago. It is a low income senior housing. It is subsidized. We only pay a third of our income for rent. Thank goodness. Very grateful for that, honestly. And when I first moved here, never had any problems. Most of the people that lived here, they were good people. I mean, you remember if you saw my Mean Girls video last week, that happens. But other than that, there weren't any real major problems here. There wasn't. I certainly felt safe. It is not a gated community, but I felt relatively safe here. I didn't feel, nervous. Of course, I'm a city girl. I was always raised to lock my doors and keep my windows shut at night and stuff like that. So I'm always careful anyway, but it wasn't like a real big problem here for even in the beginning part, maybe the in the of the pandemic and stuff. So it all started maybe about a year and a half ago, and I initially had a neighbor. I live in a little building that has 6 apartments in it. We're kind of a U-shaped building, and I live in a studio apartment. There's 2 studios in the building and 4 one-bedrooms. So I had a neighbor, a direct neighbor of mine, that was living in the same apartment that this person is, and he was well, let's just be real. He had mental illness of some kind. And so that kind of created certain kinds of problems, and he was actually really horrible to the neighbor on the other side of him, but not so much to me, so I didn't really have to deal with a lot of this directly. And it also wasn't the same kind of problems I'm experiencing now. Well, it took them a long time to get him out of there too, because and I don't want to turn this into a video all about the problems with the eviction laws, but there's a lot of problem with eviction laws. Now, I am a person that believes that people shouldn't be evicted for no reason, of course, or evicted just because they, are late with their rent a couple of times. I do think there needs to be a certain amount of strictness with eviction laws, but it's so difficult now to get anybody evicted, at least in the state I'm in. I know every state's a little bit different, but in the state I'm in, it's very difficult to get people evicted. Even when you give them an eviction notice, it takes at least 60 days, and then they can take it to court, and it goes on and on and on. Realistically, it could take up to 6 months to have somebody evicted. So that's a problem with the system. I'm not going to go into that in detail here. So anyway, this guy eventually did leave. He got an apartment somewhere else. They had already given him an eviction notice, and he did finally get out of there. So we were all like, oh, yay. And they had to completely redo his apartment. He had a lot of paranoia issues, and so he had done weird things to his apartment. It took them forever. They basically had to redo all the interior of his apartment almost. Well, I begged them at the time. I said, please move somebody in normal or, just an average person, somebody, anything. So they move in this person who, if you watched my earlier short, I did a short a few months ago, I think right after she moved in, where I talked about the fact that she was smoking in her apartment. Now, when you sign the lease here, it's a no smoking facility. You cannot smoke here. They have certain designated outdoor places that you can smoke, and most people are very respectful of that. It's not generally a problem because you've signed it on the lease. You've agreed to that. Well, the problem was she was smoking over there, and so was all of her family. She has tons of family and friends and all sorts of people. Anyway, everybody in the world was smoking over there. So she got called to task for that by the management, rightly so. And it did keep the smoking down, because I'm one of those people, I'm very sensitive to smoke, and so I could tell. I mean, it was literally coming through the walls and everything, because my apartment's right next to hers. So she did stop that, and I thought, okay, maybe it's going to be all right. And then she started having every person, and I live in a tiny town, okay, a very small town. She had every dysfunctional person, shall we call them, dysfunctional person that is in this town over to see her, which includes her, and I'm not sure if she has 3 or 4 grown children that are in their like 40s, but I know from people who live here that have known her for, back to when they were young, that this person has had a problem with drugs for most of her life. And she apparently raised her children to be the same way. And at least two of her kids, I think a son and a daughter, have been in and out of jail, if not prison. Now, apparently she herself has not been committed a felony, because that is one check they do here at the apartments, is they check for felony background. And if you have a felony, you cannot live here. Well, that unfortunately does not apply to all her family members and everyone she knows, because everybody started coming around, because apparently she's like mama bear to all these people who are dispossessed and drug addicts and criminals and, homeless, some of them. But all of them are, they all have a story. Let's put it that way. All of these people have a story. Well, she decided she was going to make her little studio apartment the flop house for everyone. And so they all just started showing up all night long, and she didn't have beds for them, so they're all sleeping on the floor, apparently. But anyway, they were all coming over any time of the day or night, sleeping over. One time, I'm pretty sure I could smell that they were doing some sort of drugs over there, smoking something that wasn't cigarettes. I could smell that one time. I reported that to management. Of course, I've reported everything to management, as everyone who lives here. This is not, I am one of her two direct neighbors, but she has affected almost all the people in this community in some way or another. She or the people who've, come over to stay with her. And I'm not going to say the management hasn't done anything. They actually have tried to do some things. They have repeatedly told her that she cannot have people staying over the night with her. In the place that we live, this is a senior community. And if you have guests, you're not supposed to have guests that stay longer than 2 weeks at a time. And even then, you're supposed to let the office know if you have a guest that stays that long. In other words, if you just have a friend that comes over and spends one night, that's not a big deal. But if you have someone staying, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, you have to tell them, and they can refuse to allow you to have someone stay over. Well, she just has kept lying about it. Well, eventually the management did put up a camera that's pointed right at her doorway, so they can see everybody coming and going. They know this has been happening. And yet, I'm not saying they haven't done anything, but their hands are constrained by the fact that this property is owned by a corporation, and they have certain rules and regulations, in addition to the eviction laws, in addition to all the other things, and in addition to the fact that I live in a tiny town that has what passes for a police force. And I'm saying what passes for because I have yet to see them do any policing. I have yet to see them do any policing. Again, this is not going to turn into a rant about the police. But in this particular town, I've come from the big city where you look at a cop the wrong way and you're going to be in handcuffs, right? I've seen them question somebody who had a knife in their hand and was kind of crazy, and they just talked to him. They didn't even take him in to find out what was going on. We just had an incident here just this past weekend where somebody trespassed into one of our buildings, which has more indoor access to apartments. And they were clearly trespassing. They did not break and enter, but they were trespassing. They holed themselves up in a bathroom. The police were called when a resident found out they were there. And the police just questioned the person and let them go with a warning. Now, I don't know what kind of deal that is. Do we live in happy land or something? Because to me, when people are trespassing and they're clearly not supposed to be there, you at least issue them a citation, okay? I don't know what the deal is. So anyway, back to this story. We don't know if that person that trespassed was part of someone she knew, my neighbor or not. We don't know. Because she seems to know, like I said, every strange, odd, dispossessed person in this frickin' town. And it's getting really old. all the neighbors see stuff going down. Now the kind of the ultimate thing that's going on is to do with drugs. So we've known that a number of them are on drugs. Anytime you see them, you can clearly tell they're on something. But there's actual drug deals going on. Like probably inside the apartment, by the fence, by the edge of the property. There's people have witnessed all this going down outside. Now, again, why isn't anything being done about this? We don't know. Management says to us, well, you call the cops if you see that going on. Well, I don't know how many of you realize this, but when you are dealing with a really rough population of people that are drug addicts, criminals, thieves, whatever, that if you call the cops on them, they may exact retribution on you. The problem with that is we're a bunch of old people. We can't defend ourselves. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to die. This is not a game. And so now things have escalated to the point where people are starting to call corporate and things like that about this. This is insane that this person still is here. It's insane that they have that the place I live has allowed this to turn into a drug hood. Just because we're low income doesn't mean that the people that live here for the most part are not upstanding citizens. This was not always a drug hood. It just turned into one in the last 2 to 3 months. So anyway, it's a little frustrating because I literally live next door to this person. The only thing I can say in her favor is that they aren't loud over there. In fact, I think because she's been trying to hide how many people she's packing in there every night. And the reason I know that there's a lot of people, not because they're talking or partying, but because my toilet backs up to her toilet. The bathrooms, back up to each other. And they had when this place was built, there was some problem with the plumbing or whatever. So what happens is when your neighbor flushes the toilet, your water goes down in your toilet. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced that. Anyway, I tell you, there's literally almost no water in my toilet after a few hours. Like there's that many people using the bathroom. So I don't know what's going to happen. I came on here because this is part of my reality. This is part of my life. This is part of the existence of living here. I have, as many of you know, I have put in applications to move to other cities, actually other places, and actually one of them may come through within hopefully maybe not more than 6 more months. So I will be happy to move to a bigger place where maybe there's a little more security, that there's police that actually do their jobs, that I just feel safer. I have lived in apartments most of my adult life. I have never had anything like this happen. I've lived in all kinds of apartments. I mean, certainly not probably the super low income apartments because I was working and stuff, but I think I only lived a couple of times in what you would consider like luxury apartments. Most of the time they were just regular apartments, not with any gates or anything like that. I never had problems like this. I never had neighbors like this. I don't know if this is a sign of the times we live in, if there's something weird going on. There's some sort of strange, like, behavioral virus going on that is affecting people in some weird way that makes them or maybe it's part of living in a small town. I don't know what has caused this, but I've reached my limit, like, up to here at this point. So it's created a lot of stress. I've had to meditate as much as I possibly can. I've had to try to make humor out of it, and I try not to think about it all the time. But it is very stressful when you live next to somebody who regularly is having criminals going in and out all night long, especially. Not as much during the day, but definitely at night. I didn't think I'd have to be more afraid living in a small town than I ever did living in a city. So I hope none of you have ever had something like this. If you have, please leave a comment below and let me know your experience of something like this with a neighbor. But I am so ready for this to be over. I cannot tell you. You know, I was going to do another topic today for my video, and I'm moving it to next week because I just needed to talk about this on here. Like I said, this is a part of my everyday life. It is what I have to deal with right now. So, anyway, deep breath. And until next time, be well. Keep moving forward. Take care.